Is the 5-day workweek dead? In this video, we finally settle the 4-5-day workweek debate, analyze 12,000 job data points, and uncover 40 years of erased history. Who would have thought? Heck, I even tried Bing. For a long time, I've always just accepted the US work culture. 10 to 12-hour days, 5 days a week. I mean, I knew it wasn't great, but I figured that's why we're all so productive. That is, until one day I was scrolling on my phone and I saw this. It might not look like much, but it shows the top most productive countries in the world. And the US isn't even in the top 5. In fact, the most productive countries actually work the least amount of hours. And I thought, fake news, this has to be a lie. Otherwise, why do we still work so many hours, right? So I spent the next few days doing more research, and I learned that not only is the 5-day work week actually really bad, but the US actually had a 4-day work week just a few decades ago. But then suddenly it just got erased from all history textbooks. And I got to figure out why. But first, I need to show you how the 5-day work week became a thing. So it all started in the 1800s with the Industrial Revolution. Thanks to technology, we created machines to manufacture stuff. People said peace to their farms, cows, and chickens and moved to the city for work. But there were a lot more workers than jobs. So factory bosses could offer low pay and terrible working conditions. And workers had no other choice. Gaslighting became a thing, so bosses required workers to work into the late evening. 14-hour days, 6 days a week. But then labor unions started popping up and demanded better working conditions and shorter working hours. Obviously, bosses weren't happy because that meant they had to treat workers better. But also they realized that if they gave workers shorter hours, then they would have to hire more workers, which increases the demand for workers, which pushes their wages up and lowers the profits for the bosses. Now fast forward a few decades of protests, bombings, arrests, and lots of deaths. Bosses finally agreed to limit working hours from 14 hours 6 days a week to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. Yay! And it wasn't until the 1920s did one man shock the entire world. Mr. Henry Ford. The same guy who created the Ford car company and assembly lines let his workers only work 8-hour days, 5 days a week. But why? Ford was the poster child of anti-worker rights and even hired people to beat up union organizers. So why did he do it? And why did he choose these specific numbers, 8 hours and 5 days? So I think I have an answer. 2 answers. Ford was a science guy, and it was during this time when scientists published data that showed that people who work long hours got tired. Who would have thought? They found that after working 8 hours, workers became less productive and were more likely to make mistakes. And Ford didn't want that. He wanted optimal productivity and efficiency. So Ford decided that instead of 2 10-hour shifts, which equals 20 hours, he could run his factories 24/7 with 3 8-hour shifts instead. Amazing! But why 5 days a week instead of 6 or 7? Well, Ford realized that people needed to actually buy stuff for businesses to make money, and people are more likely to buy stuff, like his Ford cars, if they had more leisure time, aka an extra day off of work. Yeah. We have labor rights because some rich dude wanted his workers to be more productive so he can make more money. Yay for change. Eventually, the government caught on and officially made the 40-hour 5-day workweek a thing. And 100 years later, we still follow the same exact work schedule that was implemented before modern technology and equal rights. Which leads me to wonder, just how effective is the 40-hour 5-day workweek today? Okay, so I just spent the past few hours reading a bunch of labor econ papers, and I found something really interesting. And honestly, I don't think Mr. Ford would support the current work culture that we have today, even though he kind of invented it. Let me explain. So it turns out, despite the standard 40-hour work week, the average American actually works 47 hours a week, with 39% of people working more than 50 hours a week. Thanks to modern technology, we can now watch YouTube videos on the toilet. But this also means that workers can now access their work from anywhere, even after they leave the office. Which isn't good because productivity significantly plummets after working 50 hours and is almost zero after 55 hours. And you know Mr. Ford, he wants people to be as productive and efficient as possible. So no Ford approval. But it doesn't stop there, because working this many hours actually put Americans at risk of major health issues like cardiovascular stress, disease, sleep deprivation, worse memory, tobacco consumption. The worse health we have, the more likely we are to die earlier. And dead people can't buy stuff. So businesses can't make money, which Ford doesn't approve. Another -1. But just because Mr. Ford gives the modern 5-day workweek a score of 0 doesn't mean it's bad, because good and bad are relative. we need to compare it to an alternative option, which is why you and I are gonna initiate Project Donkey. Here's the plan. I'm building a web scraper to pull 12,000 job postings from a job portal and analyzing that information to figure out if a 4 or 5 day work week is better based on the work happiness score, which accounts for satisfaction, compensation, accomplishment, and more. So I busted open my computer and started working. Okay, so I just ran into a problem. Apparently, I don't know what a 4-day work week actually is because I just learned there are 2 different definitions. There's a fixed 4-day schedule working 8 hours a day for 4 days a week, totaling 32 hours a week. Then there's the compressed 4-day schedule, which is working 10-hour days for 4 days a week, totaling 40 hours a week. And depending on the company, sometimes workers get Fridays off, sometimes Wednesdays off, and sometimes half the workers have Monday off, the other half have Fridays off. Anyways, I have no idea how to make this distinction with the available data. So we're not going to YouTube science. Oh God. Okay, so now that that's gathering data, I figured now is the best time to tell you that even though 4-day work weeks are all over the news now, it's not a new idea. In the 1930s, just a few years after Ford implemented the 40-hour work week, economists hypothesized that in 100 years, we'd only have to work 15 hours a week because of tech and automation, which clearly didn't happen. And then in 1956, Vice President Nixon suggested that the 4-day work week is almost here, which is wrong again. So it's a new day. And after going through this 12,000 data sets and reading even more labor econ studies, here it is, a mess of data. Just heads up, this is literally from the past 24 hours, so it might not be fully representative of current times when the video is released. Anyways, here's what I found. Out of 12,000 job postings, around 18% indicated some sort of 4-day work week opportunities. Of those companies, the average company work happiness score was a 61.58. The average for the 5-day company postings was a 54.56. The top 3 common job titles with a 4-day work week were mainly trade jobs or healthcare professions like technician, mechanic, or engineer, a driver, healthcare worker, which included a nurse, veterinarian, and physician's assistant. However, there was this one wild job posting that guaranteed a $550,000 salary working just 4 days a week, which I was gonna hit apply so fast until I realized hemonc is a type of doctor, and as you can tell from my YouTube science, not qualified. So based on the data, most companies that offer a 4-day work week scored a higher happiness score and are more likely to be trade jobs or involved in the healthcare profession. But in the end, what a business actually cares about is money. So to complement my YouTube science, I went through this, a global 6-month 4-day work week study. And here's the 3 things I learned, and we're putting it through my unofficial Mr. Forbes test. 1, employees were far better off at the end of the study than at the beginning. They scored higher rating on their physical and their mental health, and they were overall much happier with their lives. No complaints. Which is good for business because happy employees translate to better stock performance in the long term, and better health means we live longer, and the longer we live, the more stuff we can buy, so businesses can make more money. Mr. Ford approved, +1. One argument I kept coming across is, does it make sense to pay people the same if they work fewer days? Because if we keep the same pay and we see productivity drop, then it's likely to eat into company profits, which Mr. Ford does not like. But actually, we see in the data that overall self-reported productivity and work performance either remain the same or actually increased, which is good for the company, +1. And 3, when it all comes down to it, for the company, it's all about the cash. Now, throughout the trial, companies actually saw an average increase of 8% in revenue and a 38% in increase compared to the same year prior. So another +1. So far, it's 3 versus 0 in favor of the 4-day work week. So it does seem to be better. But I'm not convinced. Oh God, my back hurts. But I'm not convinced. Look, the 6-month study is good. It's executed well, way better than my YouTube science. But the study is only 6 months old. And as a man who fancies science, I know that sometimes people react more positively than usual to a new system or study because it's new and exciting. And also the fact that they know they're being studied. And I'm not entirely convinced on the increased revenue bit either, because it could just be seasonal variation. And also comparing it to the prior year, we had a global economic shutdown, so even a small increase can look like a lot. What I want to know is if all these benefits continue to be true in the long term, because I have a feeling that this will be the single most important thing that determines if companies ever adopt the 4-day workweek in the US. So I went back to reading older research papers to see if there are studies with longer time horizons and to see if I missed anything. So it's been a few days and honestly, I was about to give up. I couldn't find any long-term studies about the 4-day workweek, and I figured it's because testing and experimenting with this 4-day workweek concept is new-ish. But it turns out, it's not new. The US actually has one of the first documented cases of implementing the 4-day workweek all the way back to the 1940s. It's nowhere on Google, and trust me, I even went to the second page. Heck, I even tried Bing. The only reason I discovered this forgotten piece of history is because of this paper. And it's from a law school. So basically, in the 1940s, two big oil companies adapted the 4-day workweek schedule for their truck drivers. And I can only assume they reported a lot of benefits from it because later in the early 1970s, hundreds more companies converted to the 4-day workweek schedule, with 60 to 70 new companies converting every month, which is essentially going viral in the 70s. And companies absolutely loved this change. One tire company said that they saw a 400% increase in sales after implementing a 4-day workweek. Another said this change was the only reason their business survived, and another said absenteeism, which is like skipping work for no reason, virtually disappeared in the company. So clearly companies are happy and they see significant benefits, which is why I can't wrap my head around why the heck just a few years later, the adoption of the 4-day workweek just stopped. Vanished, poof. And in droves, companies started switching back to the 5-day workweek. This paper doesn't really explain why this happened, and again, I can't find any mention about this on Google. It's like this brief moment in history was just erased. So yay, we're back to square one. But this time, I shifted my focus to older papers and historic texts, expanding my search from economics to psychology, and even law now, I guess. So I think I have an answer, a theory. And it starts with this idea called the hedonic treadmill. It's the concept that extra levels of happiness is only temporary, and that over time, people revert back to their natural levels of happiness. It explains why after you get a promotion at work or after you buy a new phone, you get really, really happy for a while. But then you're back to normal, waiting for the next big thing. Similarly, people may experience an initial increase in happiness from having an extra day off of work. However, over time, they'll get used to this extra time off and it won't be as exciting anymore. Sort of like how we don't still celebrate the fact that we transitioned from a 6-day work week to a 5-day work week, even though it was a major win for labor rights at the time. And because we no longer have that newfound happiness and excitement, all that initial positive side effects that stemmed from these feelings like higher productivity or better work-life satisfaction, improved health, and other stuff, it all kinds of disappears. And we revert back to our normal state. Sort of like how we worked when we worked 5 days a week. So the theory is, after an extended period of time, companies stopped seeing the improvements they initially saw. And so they decided it wasn't worth it anymore to give workers an additional day off, especially if most other companies, like their competitors, still had the 5-day workweek, which could have put the 4-day workweek companies at a disadvantage. So I understand this hedonic treadmill theory and how the positive side effects of a 4-day workweek could stop over time. But I can't help but think that if work productivity and performance just reverts back to normal and doesn't get worse, doesn't it technically mean we don't need the 5th extra working day? It's just there. Plus, the benefits from a shorter work week go way beyond just a reduction in working hours. It allows people to have more time for other important things, like being with family and friends, developing new interests and hobbies, improving themselves, and just living. It also goes beyond the individual. It's more beneficial for society because more leisure time increases creativity, which could allow people to think of solutions to big world problems, and even helps the environment with less traffic congestion and pollution. All these things and more aren't directly the result of the 4-day work week, but they are made possible and easier because of it. And so if the 4-day work week becomes a thing and you have all this extra time, you probably heard that you could even start your own business to make more money. But is that true? Check out this video to see if the economic data and research actually says whether it's worth it or not to start your own business, because you could be making a huge mistake.